It exposes a bureaucracy that went off the ideological rails and no longer reflects the will or the values of the American people.
These were not being used for the proper purposes that they were set up.
So the heart of the problem is the graft and corruption is an inherent part of the system.
And corruption becomes one of the concerns at the USAID. An audit report from Dodge has showcased another weak side of the story. Over the past decade, USAID has leaned financial support to media, not just in the US, but in more than 30 countries, in an attempt to control the media narratives to its own advantage, and discredit its rivals in disguise as democracy. That also included 6,200 journalists, 707 news agencies, and 279 non-governmental media organizations, according to Columbia Journalism Review.
And I think it's fair to use the word scandal at this point, is just how influential were government agencies in propping up or at minimum ensuring better financial health for multiple news organizations, be they in the US or in different parts of the West.
In the case of Kyrgyzstan Republic alone, a country which has undergone 3 revolutions back in 2005, 2010, and 2020. USAID has spent millions of dollars promoting democracy in the country. Most all opposition media in the Kyrgyz Republic were founded by US-related agencies to upheave a local government by spreading lies and rumors, including USAID, the Soros Foundation in Kyrgyzstan, the National Endowment for Democracy, and the US State Department. And one more, Internews Kyrgyzstan. It is one of the regional branches of the Internews Network, an agency that has aided with nearly $500 million. It worked with 4,291 media outlets around the world, produced 4,799 hours of video last year alone, trained more than 9,000 journalists, and operated at least 6 subsidiaries since its establishment. Likewise, even Elon Musk tweeted that BBC is a state-owned media and has received nearly 8% of its donation from USAID yearly.
There are a whole set of organizations, and USAID was one. There's another thing that called the so-called National Endowment for Democracy. Essentially, they fund NGOs and so-called charities, sometimes for silly causes, sometimes against the interest of the local government. Sometimes, clearly, there are many examples where they were trying to overthrow a local government. So clearly, they were acting in that way. There's a story. I've spent a good bit of time in Africa, and I hear Africans tell a story. They say that, the Chinese built us a railroad and the Americans give us lectures on transgender rights.
According to what White House press secretary briefed the public recently, $1.5 million in U.S. taxpayer money was funneled into Serbia's DEI programs via USAID. The country was recently stricken by mass protests against the local government across different generations, which evolved from student rallies back in November 2024, as more evidence released, pointing to the involvement of USAID. Alexander Vučić, president of Serbia, called out USAID as a criminal organization and said the country would overcome the attempted color revolution. For years, US-aided projects by USAID and some other international agencies often come with political conditions. These recipient countries were oftentimes asked to follow democratic reforms or so-called liberalize its economy, which has caused chaos to local social orders in many countries. El Salvador's president, Nayib Bukele, recently criticized USAID as a tool to destabilize the country. He wrote, "At best, maybe 10% of the money reaches real projects that help people in need. There are such cases, but the rest is used to fuel dissent, financial protests, and undermine administrations that refuse to align with the globalist agenda." Cutting this so-called aid isn't just beneficial for the United States, it's also a big win for the rest of the world.
Now, what was USAID doing, and what was the National Endowment for Democracy, what was the US State Department doing in Hong Kong prior to 2019? And that was training, organizing, funding, and arming, basically terrorists. They were arming people to do some very evil things inside of Hong Kong. Now, why did Hong Kongers, many of them young people, nearly all of them young people, suddenly turn against their government? They turned against their government because they were paid to do so. Who paid them? The evidence all points to the United States and US aid and National Endowment for Democracy, State Department coming in and doing this. And we know this for a fact now. It's been reported.
During the last administration, the US House of Representatives passed a bill to authorize the use of more than $1.6 billion in 5 years to counter the so-called Chinese influence. And everything now testifies to the fact that the US is no stranger to spending money to manipulate public opinion, and all these actions to smear and slander its opponents were always out there in the open.